And welcome back to Facing South Florida. I'm Rick Folbaum, in for Jim DeFede. We are looking at the year ahead. 2018, we'll see the midterm congressional elections, a U.S. Senate election here in Florida, and a governor's race as well. So plenty of political intrigue, even before you factor in President Trump, whose first year in office has been unlike any presidency we have ever seen. So what's in store for him? Joining us, Ed Pasquale is CEO of the law firm Tripp Scott. He's also past chair of the Republican Party of Broward County. And Fernand Amandi is the managing partner of Dixon and Amandi, a public opinion research and consulting firm. And gentlemen, Happy New Year. Welcome to you both. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Rick. Happy New Year.
Ed, let me start with you as a Republican. How are you feeling heading into the midterms in November later this year?
Actually feeling pretty good, Rick, because here's what's going on. This last year has been a whirlwind with a lot of controversy, but a lot's been done on behalf of the American people. Tax reform has been passed. More of your money, more of your hard-earned money now gets to stay in your pocket. We're now bringing back repatriating dollars from overseas. So corporations now are incentivized based upon this tax reform to bring back money to work in the United States. The economy is on fire. We're seeing growth numbers at 3%. We never saw that in the 8 years of Obama. This is, again, something that we're going to see growing and growing. The stock market's telling us that. Job market is telling us that. We're now about 4% unemployment here in Florida. More people have jobs across the country. Manufacturing is coming back. Energy prices, energy sector's on fire. This is all about deregulation and tax relief that's been provided by both Congress and President Trump.
Fernand, you've been a very outspoken critic of President Trump. The midterms are typically not kind to the president in power, no matter what party he belongs to. Are the conditions right, the circumstances right for the Democrats to possibly take control of either the House or Senate or both?
Well, Rick, based on what the numbers today suggest, yes, they are. But let me just underscore one thing. One of the things that has defined this Donald Trump presidency and administration is utter chaos, instability, unpredictability. I think even Ed would have to recognize we're seeing strangeness all around. And that means that anything could happen. There are so many variables at play, Rick, that we don't know. But the circumstances today, and based on what the numbers say today, look like a very, very bad year for the Republicans, a very positive year for the Democrats, just based on what the numbers suggest. Right now, generic Democrat has a 13-point lead over a generic Republican candidate. We've never seen those numbers before. And another unimpeachable fact is that President Trump has the lowest approval rating of any president in the history of polling at this point in his presidency.
Let's dig down and talk about some of these congressional races here in South Florida. Redistricting has created what some say is a more favorable map for Democrats. So I'm just wondering, who is most at risk here? Carlos Curbelo?
No, actually, I think Carlos has done such a great job with his district. He has been a strong voice, independent voice in a Republican-led Congress. He has sided with the Republicans when need be, when he thinks it's right, and he's sided opposite of the Republicans when he thinks his district is in line. That is somebody who is a true independent representative, and frankly, he deserves, I believe he's going to get the nod from his district.
Has he done enough, do you think, Fernand, to sort of paint himself as this independent? He has gone against the president and the Republican Party on DACA. He is a big proponent of legislation to help curb climate change. Has Carlos Curbelo positioned himself well enough here to win another term?
Well, I give Carlos credit for making the attempt and the effort. Certainly on climate change, I think he's been a good faith congressman. The problem that he has is he's got two almost disastrous votes. One on the Affordable Care Act repeal and replacement. His district has one of the highest enrollments of the Affordable Care Act in the entire United States. He's going to have a very hard time defending that. That's compounded by his recent vote on tax reform, one of the poorest socioeconomic districts. None of the gains that have been promised and talked about will be passed on. I think he's going to have a tough time defending that. And fundamentally, he is a Republican running in a district that performed overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton last time around. I think in a blue wave year, which the conditions seem to be set for, he will be taken out as well.
It's no secret, Ed, that President Trump would like to see Governor Scott oppose Bill Nelson and try to beat Bill Nelson, keep him from another term in the U.S. Senate. Do you think that that's likely? The governor has been a little coy in terms of whether or not he's going to run. First of all, do you have any inside information on that? And if he were to get into the race, how do you think he'd fare against Bill Nelson?
If he were to get in the race, because he's got, he still has his obligation as governor, and I think he's got to oversee the next legislative session that you talked an earlier segment. But look, Governor Scott is somebody that you should never underestimate. He came out of nowhere and won the Republican nomination and won the first term as governor. And then he beat what was a serious challenge from Charlie Crist on the Democratic side last time, and now is a two-term governor and has been very successful. Understand, Rick, the economy in Florida when Rick Scott took over and the economy today is vastly two different economies. One had 10%, close to 10% unemployment, and now we're closer to 4%. Economic activity in the state has been good. The state is in great financial shape as opposed to other states like California, Illinois, New York. Florida is in great financial shape in no small part due to the stewardship of Rick Scott. And lastly, Rick Scott showed tremendous leadership during Hurricane Irma and had won accolades from across the aisle. Both Republicans and Democrats recognized the strong leadership that he showed. I would not underestimate him if he decided to run in the Senate.
You don't typically see someone getting into a race who has already won statewide office and proved that he can do that. If Rick Scott were to get into the race against Bill Nelson, he's won in the state of Florida.
Well, I mean, he's certainly not anyone. You can never dismiss a governor getting into any race, but I think the very fact, Rick, that we're talking about whether he will or he won't at this late stage is the best evidence that Governor Scott himself knows what a horrible year it's going to be for the Republican Party. He covets this Senate seat he has for a long time. The very fact that he's not in it, because we're already on the clock for the calendar year, and we all know how difficult it is to raise the money, run around the state, especially running against a popular Democratic incumbent, Bill Nelson. The fact that he's not in tells you that he knows it's going to be a very difficult year for Republicans.
Rick Scott's going to be the next senator from Florida to join Marco Rubio in the Senate, and that's going to be a flip of a seat from Democrat to Republican. In what you say is going to be a Democratic year, I say not, because in the Senate you have 25 seats that have to be defended by Democrats and only 10 that have to be defended by Republicans. And just by the math of those numbers, and in states, many states that went Trump's way, a Democratic senator has to defend a seat. I'm going to tell you that the Senate is going to move more Republican in 2018 than we see today.
Well, we can ask Senator Jones of Alabama about that, who, by the way, is a Democrat in the reddest state in the nation.
All right, let's talk about the governor's race, because Rick Scott will not be in the governor's mansion. We don't know whether he'll be in Washington, but Ron DeSantis, the president's choice, he tweeted out his support within the last couple of weeks, urging DeSantis to get into the race. Now we know DeSantis is in the race. Of course, the Democratic field is unsettled at this point, but how do you size up the race for the governorship?
Well, look, on the Republican side, you've got a gargantuan struggle now, already in and of itself, with Adam Putnam and House Speaker Corcoran, the likely candidates. They themselves, that was a heavyweight battle, with the specter of Ron DeSantis already having the president's endorsements and his supposed access to billions of dollars and billionaire donors. That's something you can't take lightly. But again, I want to underscore, right now, today, Donald Trump's endorsement means something in the world of politics. We have no idea where Donald Trump may be. You have a book that has come out this week where his entire staff has said he is incompetent, he is not up to the job as president, and Donald Trump's endorsement may not mean a hell of a lot this time, 6-7 months from now, in the thick of the race. So on the Republican side, very competitive. I think you see the same dynamic on the Democratic side. However, I think in that case, you have much more of a clear front runner in the case of Gwen Graham, who was benefited by the fact that John Morgan has decided not to run on the Democratic side. Whether or not he gets in later could upend the race, but right now I think she looks like a front runner.
Ed, real quickly, who do you see running as a Democrat and as a Republican in the race for the governorship?
Look, let me stop you. I do think the Republicans have a great choice among the three candidates, Corcoran, Putnam, and DeSantis.
Do you have a favorite? Are you endorsing anybody?
I'm not endorsing anybody. But here's the other side of it. The other side is, honestly, you have three: Gillum, Graham, and Levine. And honestly, those candidates, the race is going to be close. Florida's a telltale state. It's a purple state. It's going to be a close election. Again, I still see, as a group of the three nominees on either side, potential nominees, I see as stronger candidates on the Republican side.
Gentlemen, stand by. When we come back, the Trump presidency, the explosive new book that Fernand just mentioned, and what if Democrats win either house of Congress? Could the impeachment dreams of the president's critics suddenly become a reality? More with Ed Pasquale and Fernand Amandi when we come right back.